Welcome to Books and Ideas Audio, a presentation of the Vancouver Writers Fest. The Vancouver Writers Fest connects people to exceptional books, ideas, and dialogue through year-round programming that ignites a passion for words and the world around us. We carry out our work on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. This month on the podcast, we're featuring a conversation with Timothy Caulfield, a Canada Research Chair in Health Law and Policy, a professor in the Faculty of Law and School of Public Health, and Research Director of the Health Law Institute at the University of Alberta. Caulfield joined us at our Books and Ideas event series on Granville Island on January 30th, 2025, to discuss his new book, The Certainty Illusion: What You Don't Know and Why It Matters, and the essential lessons it shares in our era of misinformation. He speaks here with award-winning journalist and author Marsha Lederman. The Vancouver Writers Fest would like to thank our public sector funders, without whom we couldn't do our work. They are the Government of Canada, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Government of BC, the BC Arts Council, the City of Vancouver, and CMHC Granville Island.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Hurtig, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Vancouver Writers Fest. Welcome to Books and Ideas, featuring Timothy Caulfield in conversation with Marsha Lederman. You know, when programming this series, we look to topical books that help shine a light on issues that inspire and sometimes confound. Caulfield's new book, The Certainty Illusion: What You Don't Know and Why It Matters, is perfectly timed for this era we are in. Marsha is going to provide a much more fulsome introductory of Timothy Caulfield, but one of the things that stood out to me in his bio is his membership in the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, the mission of which is to promote scientific inquiry, critical investigation, and the use of reason in examining controversial and extraordinary claims. And isn't this just what we need right now? About 1 million of him circulating around. We're very excited to bring this new literary series to Vancouverites, and we hope it'll capture some of the magic and immersion of our flagship October Festival. We want this series to give book lovers a chance to mingle and meet before and after the event as well, and to gather in this unique cultural space that is Granville Island. We're grateful to CMHC Granville Island for providing this space for this series, and we look forward to welcoming you, our patrons, just about every other week between now and late June. On to our conversation. Our host tonight is no stranger to the Vancouver Writers Fest. Journalist Marsha Lederman is an award-winning columnist for the Globe and Mail and a best-selling author to boot. Her memoir, Kiss the Red Stairs: The Holocaust Once Removed, was published in 2022, and I've heard it on great authority that she has a couple more projects coming our way soon. Please welcome Marsha Lederman and Timothy Caulfield.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to introduce Timothy. That's him. And then we're going to get going. So Timothy is an award-winning thinker. He is professor in the Faculty of Law and the School of Public Health at the University of Alberta and research director of the Health Law Institute at the U of A. He was born in Massachusetts on Cape Cod and now lives in Edmonton. Yeah. He is a member of the Order of Canada. He was in a rock band that once opened for the Ramones. And much later in life came to appreciate Fleetwood Mac.
That's right.
After a lot of disdain.
It was a journey. It was a journey.
He is famously not a fan of Gwyneth Paltrow's. And I hear you have a Sputnik tattoo. Is that correct?
I do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. We can talk about that. He's published around 400 academic articles, not all in 1 year. That's a reference to something in the book. He hosts documentaries. He's written 4 previous books, in addition to editing and contributing to several others. So the book we're going to be talking about tonight is The Certainty Illusion, What You Don't Know and Why It Matters. It is terrific, and it is extremely distressing. And it's so unbelievably relevant at this moment. Did you orchestrate like this whole Trump presidency? And yeah, anyway, it feels like we've gone from the information age to the misinformation age, and we're going to talk about that tonight. So you're going to help us deal with all of this. So welcome to Vancouver.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, you guys. It's an honor. It's an honor.
All right, so we're going to just go right into the events of today. If you
We're
don't
getting right
mind.
into it.
Yeah. So I kind of hate to start here, but I have to. So the man who, I don't know if he invented the term fake news, but he certainly popularized it, is now president of the United States again. And today he held a news conference and basically blamed that tragic mid-air collision in DC last night on diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and on the Democrats. So I'm watching this on TV and literally screaming at my TV. My cat was quite scared, actually. And a reporter basically laid it out. He said to President Trump, "You've blamed this on DEI, but you also don't know what happened yet. Remember, this was this morning. So how can you say it's DEI?" And Trump says, "Because I have common sense. And unfortunately, most people don't." So when the President of the United States makes a claim that, is obviously partisan, how dangerous is that? I mean, I can yell at the TV, and I even laughed, even though it's not funny, but other people are not going to receive it that way.
It's a monstrous problem, and I think we're starting, right with disaster. Right? He said this is a grim topic. Let's start grim. It is really a disaster, and why do I think that? Because here, what happened this morning, that statement is a really good example of the profound normalization of misinformation, right? It wouldn't have been that long ago, everyone in this room can probably remember, where people would have been aghast. They would have said, "What are you saying? That's just simply not true." There's this acceptance that misinformation is part of our public discourse. So that, I think, is profoundly depressing. And it's also a really good example how every topic now is up for grabs. What he said, like about being DEI, let's not pull punches here. That was just flat out racism, right? It was flat out racism. And then he wraps that racism in misinformation, right? And people accept it because of that. It goes down, the racism goes down a little bit easier when it's wrapped in some kind of misinformation-infused justification. And I think that's exactly what happened. And we see that happening again and again now. And as someone who has followed this for really my whole career for decades, it's amazing to see this happen. When I started my career and really started digging into misinformation, it was viewed as almost kind of I said this on CBC this morning, kind of a cute topic, right? "Oh, Tim, you're working on a fun topic, Gwyneth Paltrow and jade vagina eggs," right? And now, a decade later, we're talking about the destruction of the foundations of knowledge and our ability to sift through what's real or not. So I think it is a really good example of how bad it's gotten, and also how the pushback is starting to stop. Right? There's been this normalization. And if I could, I know I'm going on long, but it's a great point. There is this interesting series of studies that have come out that Stephen Lewandowski from the UK is one of the researchers who's done a lot of work in this space that talk about the difference between belief speaking and fact speaking. Right? And fact speaking is, the old school facts that are tethered to reality and tethered to evidence and science, and belief speaking, which is really people just agreeing with the gist of what has been said. So there have been a series of studies, not just work by Stephen Lewandowski, but even a more recent study, found that people may not believe something to be literally true, right? But they believe the gist of the statement.
Like they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats.
That was the example I was going to. You're reading my mind. We're in sync. That's a great example, right? People, I'm sure, don't actually believe that immigrants are eating cats and dogs, but they believe. I
wouldn't be so sure about
you're
that,
right.
by the way.
There's a sector, but a large portion of people believe the gist of that sentiment. It speaks to their sensibility and perhaps where they want the country to go. And so there's empirical research to back this up. And what these researchers have found is that if you say something emphatically enough, with enough conviction, it feels real, even if the facts don't support it. And one of the best people to do this are people like Tucker Carlson, Jordan Peterson is another really good example. You just say something with enough conviction, it feels right. And I think that's what we saw today with Donald Trump.
And it is so polarized along political lines. So you mentioned Jordan Peterson, Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump. These are not my favorite people, and I imagine there are other people in this room who feel that same way. There might be others who disagree, and that's great. But if someone tells me they're a Jordan Peterson fan, I feel like I can come up with all sorts of background on who that person is.
Yeah, you're first of all, again, empirically, we can say this is true. And I do most of my research in the health space, right? And ideology was always lurking in the background with a lot of this misinformation in the health space, but now it's at the absolute fore. It's at the forefront. Ivermectin is another example. You could walk out on the street and ask someone, do you think ivermectin works for COVID? Do you think it's an effective treatment? And now ivermectin's a miracle drug. It works for everything, but let's just stick with COVID. and how they answer that question, you can guess what they believe, probably about 20 other things, maybe more. That is the degree of polarization that has happened now. So there's absolutely no doubt that, let me give you another example, and I hate to use, everyone's sick of the vaccine conversation, but I think it's a really good example. In the United States, and increasingly so in Canada, your political identity is the strongest correlation to your vaccination status. So that's in the United States. It's the strongest variable predicting your vaccination status, more than race, more than income, more than insurance coverage, more than age, did I say education already? More than any other variable, which is astounding, absolutely astounding. But that's where we are.
Since you mentioned vaccines, COVID-19, how much of a turning point was the pandemic in the misinformation space?
Huge, first of all. That's the short answer. The long answer, we were moving towards an acceleration of misinformation. We had, of course, social media, right? Was really starting to take off. We had influencers starting to take off. Podcasters starting to get a foot in the broader media landscape. COVID-19 hits, and we had this. Do you guys remember this? For about 3 months, we were all together, and we were all like a family.
We're all in this together.
We're all in this together, and we were celebrating public health officials, and
we're banging pots, and then we're like banging heads 2 seconds later.
The shift has been incredible, and I think what happened is, there was an immediate kind of opportunism that emerged, right? Conspiracy theories started to take off, and echo chambers started to form, and we started to see this incredible polarization. There was a really interesting study, again, came out 2 weeks ago, that found that polarization enhances the spread of misinformation. So what do I mean by that? And yes, they found people on the right more likely to spread misinformation. That was one of the findings, but primarily in situations that are polarized. And why that's important is it speaks to why one of the reasons people are spreading misinformation. They're protecting their community, they're protecting their tribe, they're protecting their echo chamber. And if they feel like that their tribe is being threatened, they're more likely to accept and spread misinformation that supports their tribe's narrative. Now, I want to pause here because we're sounding like we're really partisan, you and I. So I think it's important to recognize this happens across the ideological spectrum. You can't say that enough, right? And in my area, in health misinformation, for most of my career, the health information was emanating from the left. You think, crystals, new agey, right? That was the vibe, right?
Hold on, what's wrong with crystals?
Yeah. And levitation and all that kind of thing. And, think, Woodstock, kind of hippie, right? And now, so when I critiqued that work in the past, people on the left would say, you're not open to different ways of knowing. This is, that was the critique. And those on the right were a little bit friendlier to it. It was, very sensible and common sense. And now we've seen a shift. And by the way, research backs this up. There have been some studies. One I often refer to is a survey, a Gallup poll in the United States that found in the 1970s, it was the Democrats that were more suspicious of science and the Republicans that were the supporters of science, right? So it's, Agent Orange, you got the Vietnam War, Nixon, right, Watergate. And now we've seen a complete shift, right? Having said that, I've never seen it as bad as it is now, right? It's become institutionalized, and part of that, I think, is because it's, we know it's a very effective tool. It's an incredibly effective tool to gain power. You use fear, rage, grievance, and it works.
This is fun.
The book does have fun topics in it, doesn't it?
It does, and we're going to get to them. But social media, how much of a factor is that? I mean, we now have these rage machines where anyone can publish anything, and then we're fed algorithms that feed into the things we already believe. And then we've got someone like Elon Musk in charge of, what has been kind of the prime platform for political discourse.
And Mark Zuckerberg isn't going to swing in and save us either, right?
Yeah, well, all the tech bros, and they're right, no matter who the president is, being that tight with the president, they're now the ones in charge of, how we communicate.
So there is now a large body of evidence that tells us that the algorithms that drive social media platforms, whether you're talking about X or Facebook or whatever TikTok, they push the misinformation onto our screens because that's the content that is going to get the most clicks, gets the most attention, is going to generate the most activity in our information economy. That's what matters, right? So studies show that, and there, as I said, there's a large and rich body of evidence to back that up. That doesn't surprise anyone in this room. Everyone knows that. So there's no doubt that's the case. But unfortunately, now we're also seeing, as everyone knows, the social media platforms pull back from doing anything to stop the spread of misinformation. Zuckerberg and Meta being the most, the best example of that, but X has always been pretty terrible at moderating their content. So yeah, it's an incredibly problematic situation. And that, of course, is one of the big shifts that has happened over the last 10 years, is the rise in power of these social media platforms. And if you think of a platform like TikTok, and our team, and I know that one of my researchers, one of my amazing researchers, the person who does the real work, is in the in the room here. A really interesting research on how much of the content is, like, we can quantify this, is bad on these social media platforms. For example, their team has done research on mental health information on TikTok and other platforms, finding, I believe, 33% of it is misleading. He can shout out if I'm wrong. We did another study also with Marco Zanoni, where we looked at cancer books on Amazon. So you get a cancer diagnosis. A very sensible thing to do is, I'm going to get a book and learn about my condition and maybe find a community. So you go to Amazon, you put in a search term, and we found that 49% of the books that come back are at a minimum misleading, and if I'm being honest, I think they're bunk-filled. And then the first page of books, we're both authors, we know that's the page that matters, right? The first page of the search results, we found 69% of the books on cancer were misleading. And again, I can say, as someone who's looked at, helped with the research, a lot of them are complete bunk, like just complete nonsense. So yeah, the scale of the problem generated by not just social media, but search engines and the online environment in general is just horrific.
So, I don't want to...
More grimness here.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to sound self-serving here, but as a member of the mainstream media, it seems to me the work we do, my colleagues who are actual journalists who do actual research and publish actual facts, that kind of work has never been more necessary. And yet we are seeing a really dire continuing on the dire theme, a real dire disappearance of, media and that kind of media. And we're seeing this taunting, like the lamestream media and legacy media, which is meant as an insult. So that's really concerning, isn't it?
It's hugely concerning. And I think another point that you raised there is the rise in distrust. So surveys have consistently shown that trust in the mainstream media is declining, the legacy media, whatever you want to call it, traditional media is declining. And people are increasingly getting their information from other sources. And I'm going to come back to that other sources in just a moment. But we can't, and the narrative is often that trust is being lost because the mainstream media is screwing up and they're terrible and they can't be trusted because they shouldn't be trusted. When in reality, we know from research that distrust has been created by the spread of misinformation. The goal is to create distrust in institutions to make room for other voices, other narratives. And some of that comes from, we shouldn't forget, from state actors, from other countries trying to throw sand in the gears of our democracy. And you know what? They're winning. They're just by creating this distrust. So then you go to these other sources, and we know how, again, research tells us how terrible these sources really are. Studies have shown, for example, that influencers, I think the study is 60% of influencers don't check, do any fact checking before they post. So think about that. And more people are getting their information from influencers, from people like, I can pause and everyone knows what name I'm going to say, Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan has become one of the most influential voices in North America, certainly, maybe, in the world, given the sway that North America has over geopolitics. This, bad comedian is dictating, how things play out in the free world, which is really, remarkable. And we know that they have this influence because, studies, they tell us that.
As you're talking, I'm remembering the first time I heard the term alternate facts or alternative facts. It was Trump's, one of his press secretaries very early on.
Kellyanne Carter, there we go.
Yes, thank you.
Good team effort.
And I remember at the time, I thought, this is outrageous. It's hilarious. This is crazy. And now it's like part of the landscape.
It is. And I come from Alberta.
Oh, yeah.
and they're called contrary voices now, right? Alternative science. Those are two phrases that the premier of our province uses with a straight face. contrary voice. We heard it, several times this week. Contrary voices and, alternative science is how we should be informing our policy. Earlier you talked about, fake news. And so that term was originally used in a constructive manner. So it was by people who were doing research on fake news, right? And it was co-opted by Trump and that community to play back against the people claiming it's fake news. So he weaponized that term. And you know what? It's happening now with misinformation. As someone who's a misinformation researcher, I have misinformation on research grants and that word. Now you see people say, if anyone claims it's misinformation, they're lying, right? So if you're worried about misinformation, you're automatically the baddie. And they're the good guys. They're the good guys because they're protecting your freedom of expression or your ability to, listen to contrary voices.
Great. Can we talk about that COVID-19 report out of Alberta?
Sure. If we must.
How bad is this? I mean, the report itself, but also the fact that the report exists and is going to be used.
Yeah, and I think those are two things, right? So I'll try to put my rage aside and sort of do like very much an objective analysis of this report. And I was very fortunate from Friday evening, really until yesterday, I worked with a wonderful team from Alberta of infectious disease experts, of pediatricians, of public health experts, of political scientists, people who, and virology researchers who have spent their entire career of scientists studying this. We worked together to produce a letter that we sent to the Premier asking her to rescind the study. And the reason I raised that is we really did try to look at this report and say, what does the evidence actually say, right, about this? And look, it wasn't very hard. The report is terrible. Like, that's my objective obsession, my non-rage version.
That's the non-rage
That's the non-rage
answer.
version. It's terrible. Like, it ignores a vast body of evidence that has been produced by independent researchers all over the world. I mean, a vast body of evidence on the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. It ignores the surveillance mechanisms that occur all over the world. You could make an argument that the COVID vaccines are the single most studied biomedical intervention in human history, right? Look, are they perfect? No. Are we always learning? Yes, because you're always learning with science. That's a good thing. They ignore all of that work and focus on, conspiracy theories and retracted studies. There's a section there where they kind of promote ivermectin, which is incredible. This is an official government report, right? And in that section, they refer to retracted studies, so studies that have been, published and then retracted because there was some methodological flaw or something wrong with it. They also push, the idea that, all the public health measures were inappropriate, on and on and on. So the report is fundamentally problematic. It was also it's clear it was made in a very sloppy manner. I don't know if you guys heard this. So this is an official government report. They had so it says, Government of Alberta final report on it, right? And they had at least one author that didn't even consent to his name being on it. And he asked to have his name retracted. So this was one of the more prominent individuals associated with this report. He asked his name to be retracted. And he also said that he disagreed with the report and he was supported vaccination. He said, I think his actual quote was, "I'm a big supporter of vaccines." The report also has, I'm going to be very careful with my wording here, suspiciously similar language to another report. Very, very similar language. So this is an official government report. The fact that the Premier is supporting it, is doubling down on it, this goes to the second point you made, is really troubling. I mean, it's really troubling. She could have made some statement like, well, I'm going to take a moment here to reflect on this report. She didn't do any of that. She doubled down and embraced it, which again goes to what we started this conversation with, the complete normalization of misinformation, of conspiracy theories, of pseudoscience. It's now viewed as normal and accepted to tolerate that kind of what I would call knowledge misconduct.
And is it worse when it comes from the top? So
Yes.
Danielle Smith, Donald Trump, and when I say worse, I mean more dangerous. So, and another example might be Pierre Poilievre, who when anything goes wrong, it's Justin Trudeau's fault, no matter what.
Hey, I'm in Alberta. I don't know what these people are going to do with all the trucks that say, fuck Trudeau, sorry. Can they repaint it to say? I mean, there are a fleet of trucks that say that. Right? So, sorry, I interrupted you.
They're working on that. I think Poilievre is saying, well, they're all Trudeau. They're all Trudeau. So now when you have F Trudeau, you also mean F Cristia Freeland
right.
or
It's just
Mark
a whole
Carney
thing.
or whoever wins. Karina Gould. No, I know you don't, but that was what he said. Anyway, so when you hear this kind of misinformation coming from the top, from the man who's probably going to be our next prime minister, from the president of the United States, from your premier, how is that more dangerous?
It is more dangerous, and I even think it's more dangerous because what we're also seeing is, I think what happens often in Canada is they give permission. They're a little less explicit than Donald Trump, and Poilievre's really good at this, I think, where he sort of gives permission to believe the conspiracy theory, whether it is something like chemtrails or I can't remember if he's commented on chemtrails. I wouldn't be surprised if he has. Premier
Danielle Smith
yes.
has.
That's right. They give permission, right, to the anti-vaxxers, to those who think immigrants, the great replacement kind of idea, right? They won't out and out endorse it, but they make room for it. So it's clear that this is our community, this is our tribe, this is what we believe. And again, we always have to pause and recognize this happens across the ideological spectrum. We really feel like we're picking on the right because in this cultural moment, that's really is where it's emanating, not just in Canada, but really around certainly in the United States and around the world. But you can pick topics where this happens across the ideological spectrum. And I also think it's important, and it's hard, and I haven't done a very good job tonight, and I apologize, to have a degree of empathy, right? Because, I'm sorry.
There's still time.
There's still time. Because this idea of community is important. So there's been some fascinating studies that have shown that people come to conspiracy theories and they believe conspiracy theories because they're looking for communities, right? And the trucker situation, you talk to people who were part of that, and that's how they talk about that experience. Talk to everyone else who's living there, it was a hellscape, but for them, it was a very special moment in their life. And it becomes very difficult to say things that are going to run counter to that new family, right, to that new community. And that's why it's so difficult sometimes to pull people out of these conspiracy theories. And this happens in a micro way on a variety of topics. So there was an interesting study, I think it was also from Australia, where they did the research looking at how people fall into conspiracy theories online. And you can have a dramatic event that happens in your life. Maybe it is a scary diagnosis or something's happened in a crime that's happened in your community. And then you get curious, you go online and you start to get some answers, and then you start to feel like you're part of a community. And then once you become part of that community, you want to defend that community. And we're certainly seeing that happen now.
I really want to get to more specifics about your book, but I can't not ask you about RFK. If he's confirmed, which I have this terrible feeling he might be, how damaging could that be?
He's already been unbelievably damaging, right? And he's that damage, that destructive force that is RFK Jr. just seems to be accelerating. So what do I mean? Everyone knows this. He really is one of the worst actors in the anti-vax space. And his rhetoric, I don't think it's hyperbole to say, has likely led to the death of thousands of children around the world. Everyone knows the Samoa story, right, where he promoted anti-vax rhetoric in that country, which led to the death of dozens and dozens of children. Now he'll say, I didn't know what's the direct link there, but we know that vaccination hesitancy that leads to not lower uptake of vaccines leads to death, right? So that's problematic, obviously, right? Obviously. Then you have just his contribution over the last 18 months, even since he's been running and leading to this normalization of sane washing of these ideas, right? Of not just with respect to vaccines, but HIV and mental health medications, on and on and on, right? It's been that normalization, that legitimization of those things, I think, is going to do lasting harm, and we're seeing it here in Canada. I definitely see that rhetoric having an impact. I think you see echoes of it in Alberta, right? When you see that report from, the Alberta government, I think that is an echo from RFK Jr., because I think those people feel like they're part of that community. And the rage is just unbelievable, right? That comes from these individuals, the anti-vaxxers, the hate. I know, you're an author, so you experience this too, but I experience it daily, right? Daily, death threats and, on and on. It's so that, and I bring that up to highlight how deeply these people are in the rabbit hole, and RFK Jr. gets a lot of blame for digging that rabbit hole. Okay, we haven't even got to him being confirmed, because that's going to happen. I hope I'm wrong. Yeah. If he gets confirmed, all of these things are just going to become, institutionalized, right?
I feel like I need to ask you a happy question.
Let's
yeah. Was it the tattoo? Yeah. Well, was it hard to write this book with everything changing all the time? Were you tearing your hair out? Oh no! Now this has happened. Now this has happened.
Yes, I'm not making this up. I actually sent an email to my editor, who I love, and thanked her for putting up with me for that exact reason. Because, do we include this in the book? Is it moving too fast that it doesn't make sense to include it? You know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Do I include it in the book? Is this going to be out of date if I include it in the book? Is this about? So yes, it was very hard. And just think of AI. And you've seen I have the one AI chapter that I think is it 3 sentences, right? Yeah. Is AI going to make this worse? And yes is the chapter. Yeah. But it is, so yes, I think it's been very, that was a challenge. And so I very much, when I was writing the book, tried to use examples that were going to have that evergreen quality, right? So even if the technology changed, these stories, these examples are still going to be relevant.
So you're looking at scientific studies, academic studies. You write about labels on food, clean cosmetics, online reviews, all of which, and not even just online reviews, actual film reviews, all of which we have to be really skeptical about. Is basically the message. There, I've summarized your book. So is it fair to say that we should really mistrust everything that's put in front of us, or at least be skeptical about it?
So the phrase that I've landed on, and I actually, after talking about this book for a while, is be skeptical, don't be cynical, right? Because we don't want to be so cynical that we disregard the good. We're skeptical of the good evidence that when it emerges, right? And there are actually studies to back that up. There is this spillover effect of debunking and pre-bunking that happens in some contexts where, yes, the debunk and pre-bunking worked, But then you also became skeptical of the good, the information that you should be trusting. So be skeptical, be vigilant, but don't be cynical that the good information is out there. And the good news, there is always, good news, is there are more and more great voices out there talking about this stuff. There's young, creative science communicators that are doing amazing job, right? From diverse communities. So there is good news, and you just got to find those voices.
Okay, but this is what happened to me as I was reading your book. And by the way, the book is dedicated to science communicators, which I loved.
Yeah.
Normally, I'm the most skeptical person sitting on a stage, any stage, but not right now, probably. But so I'm reading your book and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I haven't been skeptical enough. Like yesterday, I bought organic half and half cream. It was 20 cents more than the regular.
What the hell are you doing?
And I thought, should I be doing this? Timothy would not approve. I buy clean cosmetics. I buy grain-free pet food for my cat, all of which are things you write about. And
I do all those things.
Yes, and basically say they're, bunk, maybe? Sometimes they might be.
There's lots of layers to that question.
I know.
Because the other thing is that you have to give your self-permission, to not worry so much, right? This goes that be skeptical, not cynical. Because as I joke in the book, we buy the best food for our cats because they deserve it, right?
Yes, they do.
They do deserve it. Detective Turtles, she needs her special treats.
And is it grain-free?
It is grain-free. And I think it's all organic, non-GMO. But so you have to give yourself some license, but know that all those terms are being used to deceive you. They all are. All the ones I list in there, they're at a minimum, the evidence about organic, non-GMO, locally grown, is the evidence about the benefit of those things at most is more complex, right? It's more nuanced than that health halo, that label, that goodness illusion, as I call it, would have you believe. Right, so I think at a minimum, you need to recognize that because the reason it's there is it's meant to be a shortcut to making a decision, right? It's meant to give you this false sense of certainty to make that decision. The other thing I think is really important is to recognize that we are all fooled. I'm a misinformation. It's what I do. And we're all fooled.
What has fooled you?
Okay, I've got a really good, very recent example. Okay, I don't know if you guys heard this, but in Mississippi, they recently passed a law, or they didn't pass the law. This bill has been put forward to be considered by the Mississippi legislature. I think it's what it's called. And the name of the law is Conception Starts at Erection. And are you laughing at me? This is real. So, I mean, and the law, you can look at the law, says that it should be illegal to excrete DNA for any other purpose than conception.
Oh my.
So you can find this. Yeah, I think they're gonna have trouble. Teenage boys. So
I stopped myself from saying that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I read that, and I'm not kidding you guys, I believed it. So in other words, I thought this was a real piece of legislation, because it is a real piece of proposed legislation. You can see it. And the person who's putting it forward, the legislator, I think he's a senator, I think is what it's called in Mississippi, a state senator, is with a straight face saying that this law is necessary. And so not just myself, but my colleagues were kind of fooled. This is outrageous. Is this how bad it's gotten? And of course, this is a clever ploy by this legislator to show how absurd the other side of the aisle is to try to control women's bodies, right? So, hey, if you're going to say that, women can't choose what to do with their body, men should not be masturbating. Let's, and so it was a very, but in that moment, And it's a really good example because it shows how misinformation spreads. It played to my preconceived notions about Mississippi, about the crazy things, how insane the world is right now. It played to my rage. It played to something I feel very strongly about, women's right to choose. And so in that moment, I believed it, right? So in the book, I suggest that we should all keep a list of things that we have been fooled about. It's very important to have that scientific humility, right? Because it's a good reminder that this can happen to all of us, and it does happen to all of us.
And one of the pieces of advice that you give is to pause before you retweet with rage. Pause and think about it.
I tweeted it. Tweeted it. You can probably, I was going to delete it, but I left it on. You can find it. And luckily I put it on all my platforms. So it's on Blue Sky and on Threads and on Twitter. And it was all the same. And thankfully my note was ambiguous enough that it maybe looked like I wasn't sure if it was real or not.
You were in on the joke.
Yeah, I was in. I knew.
Okay, so stick with me on my trajectory of reading your book. So first I'm like, oh my God, I've spent all this money on organic food and I didn't need to, and I'm buying these clean cosmetics and maybe they have mold in them because you wrote about that. And then I thought, but wait a minute, why am I trusting Timothy? How do I know that what he's telling me in this book is actually real? And now I feel like I can't trust anything, and I already had trust issues, trust me. So, what do we do when, everyone in this room is now aware that we need to be more skeptical about what's put in front of us? What kinds of tools do you suggest that we use so that we don't wig out like I did?
And in the book, I don't know if you've gotten there yet.
Oh yeah, I've read the whole book.
I do joke about that, don't I? That
Yes.
why should you trust me? And I try to justify, and I explore that because
I got there before you wrote it in the book, by the way. Yes.
Because it is an interesting paradox. Someone who does misinformation research, right? So what are some of the tools we can use, right? So in the book, I do make recommendations about sort of big system change, right? So, how we do research and how we incentivize research, all that kind of stuff. But there are things I think, for sure, there are things that individuals can do. And I do think this is a generational problem. And I do think that everyone needs to be involved in solving this problem. So yes, we need to teach critical thinking skills. I wrote a piece for Maclean's a while back where I argued we should teach critical thinking skills, start in kindergarten, right? And teach those skills through all of education, and then also have adult resources available. And there are some countries that do that, like Finland and some of the other Scandinavian countries. And it's hard to study this well because there's so many variables involved, socioeconomics, nature of education systems. But the research tells us that teaching these skills really can have an impact. It does make communities more resilient. So critical thinking, media literacy. We do want to pre-bunk, so this can be also part of critical thinking skills, but that's something that institutions and individuals can do. So pre-bunking is letting people know the kind of misinformation that's going to come. And so it's like an inoculation is also how they talk about it, right? Like if these people are going to use anecdotes to try to sell you these supplements, know that an anecdote is not good evidence. You want a clinical trial, or you want some kind of good scientific study. And if you do that, people do become more sensitive and more likely to spot the misinformation. And you can do that at scale. That's another nice thing. You do want to debunk, so debunking does work. I know it feels like it doesn't work. I don't love the term debunking. I'm trying to own it a little bit. I don't love it because it sounds combative, right? And it really shouldn't be. You want it to be a good dialogue and something that's positive. And then there are these nudges, and you already touched on this idea of pausing, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of pausing, and this is something that really we all can do. You want to take that beat when you see that headline about the legislation in Mississippi and the erections. You want to take a beat and think, okay, what's going on here, right? And so researchers like Gordon Pennycook and David Rand, who I often reference, we've collaborated with Gordon, they've done numerous studies on this, and it's been replicated by other researchers to show that that pause, that moment, really can make a difference. And I think, and they speculate this too, it's because you do disconnect from the emotional part, right, a little bit. If you can just remove yourself from that emotional response to the headline, to the meme, right, to the anecdote, you might come at your content with a little bit more objectivity, right? So we want to do all those things. Yes, there's probably regulatory tools that need to come to play too. And on the individual level, how do you evaluate the content? You want to ask yourself, first of all, what kind of evidence is being used here, right? Is this just, as I said, an anecdote, a story, something scary? Or how does this fit with the body of evidence on the topic? So even doing that, and I actually believe, and I think people like Gordon and David would agree with this, and Kate Starbird at University of Washington, that the act of doing that, even if you don't know what the answer is, just the act of thinking about what's the evidence on this does a lot of the heavy lifting, about applying critical thinking to the content. And the other thing you want to do is you want to look at multiple sources, reputable sources. And yes, I think the legacy media is one of those things. And the other thing, there was an interesting study that came out. Sorry, I'm going on. You asked this for a short answer, and I'm giving you a dissertation. There was a really interesting study that came out that's going to validate this other bit of advice. They found that individuals that have a wide menu of news, ideologically speaking, are less likely to be anti-vax, more likely to get vaccinated. So again, you have to be, and they controlled for economics and stuff like that. Do you see, what I mean by that, right? Right? So I think that's really important too, right? Try to get, don't fall into an echo chamber. Don't live in an echo chamber, right? Try to get reputable commentary from across a broad spectrum.
Okay, so and I'm going to get to audience questions right after this, so please send your questions in. If and I do, subscribe to, so obviously I read the Globe and Mail, I read the New York Times, the Atlantic, the New Yorker, the Washington Post.
Left.
Exactly. So what's missing is I'm not reading Fox News, and I should be,
No. Have you heard about the Fox News study? I talk about it in the book. This is a great study. So again, but this backs up, this sort of helps, replicates this other study. They found that this was a study done at Yale, and I think Berkeley, it was Yale, anyway, two institutions in the United States, and it was a relatively big study. I think it was like 600 people involved in it. And they paid Fox News fans to watch CNN. They paid them, I think they had to watch for 7 hours a week.
7 hours?
Yeah,
it was 7 hours a day.
No.
Okay.
That's a lot of Anderson Cooper. So it's
Nobody knock Anderson Cooper.
No, I'm not going to.
Friend of me.
So I think 7 hours, and I think it's such a funny study because everyone knows what's going on, right? You're paying me to watch CNN, it's not going to work. But it did work, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good news story, right? And I'm not trying to be a fan of either one of these cable news shows. The point is that being exposed to different perspectives is valuable. Now, what's the center right publication that you're going to read?
The Economist?
The Economist, the Telegraph. There's reasonable commentary out there for sure.
All right. There are lots of questions, so I'm going to get to them. What needs to change in the K-12 curriculum to inoculate young people against misinformation?
So, I'm really lucky. I've had the opportunity to work with educators, speak to educators, and I know that they're thirsty to do this. I mean, there is a desire to make this happen, right? So, and there are great critical thinking programs popping up all over Canada, right? So I don't want to, dismiss that. And some of them are really inventive, using, video games and using, really clever board games, things like that. But I think, and I want to be careful because I've done an empirical analysis of what is happening in Canadian schools, but we need to teach them, give them the ability to apply those tools, right? So actual, practical tools to evaluate their information environment. And so there was a study that was done that found that and I believe the kids were really young, like 4 to 6 kind of age, that you just can't tell them this is, how you evaluate, watch out for that kind of, you have to expose them to actual misinformation. Like give them real world, put them in a real world setting. And I think that's going to become increasingly necessary because social media is not going away. The internet's not going away. We need to teach kids how to survive in this information environment.
And AI is only getting more and more
AI
sophisticated.
is only going to get, real quick aside about AI, I think there's a fascinating paradox with AI because it is going, maybe I'm sort of thinking this through right now, this paradox, but I think it's because AI is going to make it so difficult to tell the difference between real and fake, because you can make fake social media content, you can make a fake news release, you can make a fake study, right? So you create this whole fake ecosystem for whatever story you're pushing. It's going to make experts more valuable, subject matter experts. So if there's some fake study about mushrooms, for example, you want a mushroom expert who can tell you what's real and what's not real. Why is it a paradox? Because at this exact moment where we need experts more, people trust them less, right? Which gives even more power to the AI-generated content.
Okay, someone asks, can we just get rid of the self-published industry?
Oh, wow, yeah.
I doubt it, but
I doubt it too.
I know the question wasn't for me, but go ahead.
This question again has more to it than maybe this question asker realizes, because this is happening not just with Substack and blogs and etc. It's also happening in the research space, as I talk about in the book, right?
Yes.
There are fake journals that look.
This is shocking.
Yeah, I actually think this is one of the big takeaways I hope people get from the degree to which the information environment is polluted with fake research and fake scholarship. And just to give you an illustration from the book, there's this wonderful researcher I know is Ollie. And Ollie, she's from Australia, incredibly busy. Ollie sits on 7 editorial boards. 7 editorial boards. She publishes often. She does a lot of evaluation of research. So she's working hard. And it's amazing because Ollie is a dog. Yeah. And this researcher in Australia decided to make a point about how bad these journals are by putting his dog Ollie. And by the way, a quick personal story, I've become friends with this researcher, and he sends me emails from Ollie in Ollie's voice, which I love. I love that. Oh, I just got a paper accepted for publication. But the point, and he was punking these journals. But if you read what Ollie wrote, it's clear she's a dog, right? It's clear that she's a dog. So it just highlights how there's no standards, there's no scrutiny at all, right? One of her papers is on tummy rubs, as you know how much she loves them. It's a very sophisticated paper, so I shouldn't make fun of Ollie. But yeah, so this is a huge, huge problem. And by the way, your tax dollars are funding these journals, right? And often the researchers are being fooled too. They don't realize they're submitting to a predatory journal and Ollie is reviewing. I love that Ollie's got glasses too, so when she is.
The joke I made about not writing all 400 of your academic papers in 1 year comes from that as well, because you cite someone.
He's a meat expert in Italy, right? And he had to publish a paper every day and a half or something like that.
That's right, including weekends.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. What is the best way to counter misinformation in the lead up to Canada's national election, which might be coming pretty soon? That wasn't part of the question, especially now that social media platforms are increasingly toxic.
I do think we need and this again is a little bit of an irony, because what we do need a strong journalistic community. I believe that, and it sounds like I'm pandering to my my host here.
I agree.
But again, research backs this up, right? That people who get their news from the mainstream media, contrary to what everyone hears, are less likely to fall for misinformation, less likely to spread it. Yes, be careful with that data because that's socioeconomic data too, right? But we definitely need to do that. I think we need, and people have suggested this, we need to have a broad misinformation campaign about, and there have been some efforts to do that, as you know, and the United States too, right? There were efforts to do that. But as fact-checking is being pulled back, I think we need to really, stand up as a community and say, we demand this. And it shouldn't be a partisan thing that, these people are lying, and it should, apply to everyone, right? To have this kind of fact-checking happening. And so I hope that we see more public funding of fact-checking. That's not gonna happen. But that's something that we really, really need. Now we're part of, and this is gonna sound like I'm trying to promote our work. We're part of an organization called #ScienceUpFirst, which I started with Senator Stan Kutcher, and now I'm just an advisor on it. It's an independent organization that's run by incredibly creative upcoming academics and science communicators and creators, really, creatives, that to make nonpartisan content about important topics. And I think we need more entities like that cover a variety of topics, say political topics, for example, and that people can really turn to because they can trust it.
Speaking of partisan, we, likely in this room, claim that the political far right is where misinformation lives. Is the political far left less likely to perpetuate misinformation?
So we do have research on this, and so let's talk about this cultural moment, because in the past it was different. As I said earlier, these things shift, I think, with time and with world events. But right now, the research does tell us that at the polls, right, at the far end, yes, that's where most of the misinformation is, right, on both sides. So the left is spreading, the far left does spread misinformation. Like a good example is when the assassination attempt happened, there was a whole Blue Anon. Have you heard that phrase, Blue Anon? Instead of QAnon, Blue Anon. Movement to, it's a conspiracy theory. It was a false flag, by Trump in order to get more votes. That's an example, right, where you saw it emerge, and you do see it happen in pockets. But there is no doubt that and by the way, there is sort of ideological reasons for this historically. Populist, and I think the right that we have now is a populist right. Certainly in the United States, and I think also what we're seeing in Canada is more populist-oriented, does feed on distrust. It feeds on distrust of the elites, right, of institutions. So I think the nature of the far right now lends itself more to the misinformation strategy that we're seeing today. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. For those of us with access to decision makers, policymakers, executives, influencers, what are some strategies we can use to guide them towards the truth?
I think that's the strategy, guide them towards the truth. So those of you people you work with these individuals, I think that it is challenging, and I work with these individuals too, right? I have the opportunity to work with people or be in the room with individuals that can we talk confidentially here? I think so.
Yes, this is not going to be part of a podcast eventually.
So, okay, I'll speak broadly about this with that gentle caveat that you gave me there. I had the opportunity very recently to speak to a group very powerful group that was very diverse in their ideological leanings. And you see, this isn't going to surprise no one, you see the exact same predispositions at that level, right? These individuals are entrenched in their views, very, very difficult to move. And in some ways, I feel like because they have a public brand, it's more important to them to keep digging that rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. So that's a scary, way to answer a very sensible question.
This is a really good question. As a PhD student in a healthcare field, how can academia better communicate our research to the public/popular media when we are met with increasing suspicion?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need more of is more trainees, more young academics, more young voices to be part of this fight against misinformation. And one of the recommendations that I consistently make, I make it in the book, is we have to create institutions that support individuals like this, right? So they have to feel supported by their institution. So I mean that in a number of ways, that communicating to the public and doing this is a valuable part of being an academic. It's not something you do off the side of your desk. This is a really important part of who you are as an academic, especially someone who's paid by the public. So that's one kind of support they need to get. They need to get support from their peers, because it can be really tough. It can be very tough. You get a lot of rage, and you also need legal support. So your institution has to say, if you're going to get in trouble doing this, we got your back. We got your back, right? And that needs to happen across Canada, and I think it needs to be vocal and transparent. So that needs to happen, and we also need to give, I think, not every scientist wants to be a science communicator, but I think we need to give them the tools to do it also. And a lot of the science communication now is becoming so sophisticated that we need to also teach about working with interdisciplinary teams, working with graphic artists, working with comedians, working with storytellers. And we're also seeing that happen more and more in the science and social science communities. And I'm very fortunate I'm part of these communities. And by the way, the plus thing is that is incredibly rewarding and fun to have these teams that you get to work with. And in addition to that, I think that we are seeing that happen, right? And so that's great. And it's a fun, supportive community, and it's reason enough to get involved.
I just want to add that I think we need literate media. Literate media, because you might have a study come across a desk and it looks legit, and it's not, and you've got a reporter who doesn't know the difference. And I feel like as the media continues to.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the research I did earlier in my career was exactly on this, right? How is science being reported in the popular press? But differentiating between causation and correlation studies. Yes. Is this just a small study? Is it a pilot study? Is this just an animal study, right? Because animal studies almost never make it to the clinic, almost never, right? So if it's an animal study, you can watch the science unfold, but there's like a 99% chance it's not going to make it to the clinic. So I think that for sure we have to understand that, but that's also about science literacy more broadly.
Oh my gosh, we've got so many good questions here. I'll try to get to as many as
Sputnik.
possible.
Who asked about
Sputnik. Tell us about Sputnik.
So the Sputnik, first of all, I'm a science geek, and I love this. Do you guys know the Sputnik story? So Sputnik, the first 1957, first object humans put in as a whole. I love Cold War history, so that's another reason I did it. But it's really a science story too. The head of the Soviet space program, Korolev, is a fascinating character because he kind of fooled the Soviets into letting him do the space project, right? And he led, he was put in a gulag, and he walked back from the gulag to face trial, and they put him back in the gulag, and they only let him out when they needed his expertise to make missiles, right? And so he was able to kind of fool the regime into letting him make these incredible machines that put Sputnik into space, and they still use his launchers today. If you ever see the Soviet launcher that opens up like that, that's Korolev. And so I love the story of science prevailing in this oppressive regime.
Wow.
And also my son has the same one.
Oh, that's great. Sorry. Someone wants to know if you're considering writing a children's book, which I think is a great idea.
So,
funny you should ask.
My brother is an artist. He's an art professor at the University of Alberta. a renowned artist, if I may say, if I could brag about my...
Go for it.
He's an incredible he does all forms of visual art. And we have talked about it. We've talked about, and I even sent an email not that long ago to University of Alberta Press to perhaps, and we're thinking maybe not children's book, we're kind of thinking maybe, graphic novel kind of version. So the answer is yes.
That's great. This is a two-part question. One, what is your favorite antidote to misinformation? And part two, will the New England Patriots ever win another Super Bowl?
Can I start with the second one?
As long as you give us a factual answer.
Okay. Okay, buckle up, you guys. This is going to take a bit. No, I think the Patriots. So I am as people in this room might know, I bleed Patriot blue. Every Sunday, I still head to toe Patriots gear.
Really?
Yeah. My wife is can
Patient?
barely stand. A very patient, my long-suffering wife. She's at an Oiler game tonight, though, so she has her own addictions. I think it's going to be a decade. That's my answer to that. You can hold me to it. My favorite anecdote right now, and it shifts, right now it is the pause. It really is the pause, this idea of just pausing and reflecting on accuracy. I think it's empirically shown to work. I think it really speaks to our frenetic information environment. And it also sort of invites us to step back and just breathe for a moment. And I think we all need to do that.
Someone, and this is related, is asking if any thought has been given to developing a filter that we could install on our devices that reliably filters out the misinformation and disinformation. Devices owned by Google, Apple, Huawei.
So the answer is yes to that too, right? We talk about how bad AI is, right? But there's a good side to AI. So there are people who have suggested using AI to identify misinformation, using AI to help you fact checked, right? And to using AI to create chatbots that can kind of pull you out of the rabbit hole, right? That's tailored for you, so you can ask the AI questions that will answer, pull you slowly out. And there is some research to show that can work. So that those kinds of interventions are definitely potential. So and one of my colleagues, Blake Murdoch, has suggested that regulators should use, in fact, he's submitted a paper on this, should use AI to identify all those questionable, influencers pushing misinformation, because regulators can't look at everything, right? So if you could get assistance just to identify those things, it might make it easier for regulators. So the answer is kind of yes to that.
That's great. Good question here. Are the moderate majority part of the problem right now for remaining silent out of fear?
Another really good question, and unfortunately, I think the answer is yes. I'm sure everyone in this room has felt the sane washing that has happened since the election in the United States.
Which feels like it was 6 years ago.
It does.
Last week,
every day
the
is an eternity,
inauguration was
right?
last week, yeah.
Every day is an eternity. I think that, and I totally understand, I'm not blaming people. I don't know if you guys have done the same thing. I barely watched any news. We were talking about this earlier since the election, even though it's my job to do that. I think that people are exhausted from this fight, and we can't be. We can't be. Even when the thing happened in Alberta, talking to my colleagues, I could sense their exhaustion. So this is the Alberta report, and we were turning to our colleagues to, trying to rally them, and they totally go, "Oh my God, I'm so exhausted, though. I just can't bring myself to do this." And so I do think that it is important to stay engaged, right? To be part of it. I wrote a piece for the Toronto Star at the beginning of the month, where I argued that we are living in a fear-demic, right? That rage and anger is dominating our space. And one of the things I suggest is, again, that pause, stepping away from the noise to get perspective. And so much of the reasons we're told we're supposed to be fearful are lies, right? So we're being afraid of things we shouldn't be. They're lies, right? About immigrants, about crime, and
Vaccines.
Vaccines, exactly right. And I reckon, so to step away from the noise, but at the same time, I say we have to stay engaged, right? Meaningful change only happens if everyone is engaged. And I argue that the fear, part of what fear does is it exhausts us and takes away our reserve to fight the fights that we should be, to fight the battles that we need to fight. And so, pick your battle, don't disengage, and we can win.
There are a lot, yes, that's great. There are a lot more questions, but we're over time already. But I'm trying to think of something happy to end on. But let's say I came into some money and I could afford a new dishwasher. What should I do when I go online to read reviews? How should I do that?
Ignore the reviews.
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to give it an oversimplified response. Ignore the reviews. Go to a reputable consumer comparison company, Wirecutter, Consumer Report. It's not perfect, but it's better than their online reviews. And also ask your friends and family members. Do you know that 88% of people trust online reviews more than their friends and family?
Well, some people in our
Depends
family.
on your friends and family.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But the online reviews are mostly bogus, right?
In the book, I argue, yes, but they're bogus in different ways. Some are out and out fake. Some are manipulated, so they've been paid. Others are manipulated by our own cognitive biases, right? Who puts a review? You either hate it or love it, right? Except my book, it's 5 stars. Thanks, guys.
Timothy Caulfield, you have been a delight tonight. Thank you. And thanks to the audience for being so engaged. Great questions. And I wish us all some peace and calm and actual information that is good at some point.
Here.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
You have been listening to Books and Ideas Audio, a presentation of the Vancouver Writers Fest. To hear more events like this one and view our upcoming events, visit our website at writersfest.bc.ca.